Welcome to Loup TV. I'm your host, Gene Munster, and we have a juicy holiday gift that just showed up, a Reuters report related to Apple having a branded car available in 2024. Let me say that again. Reuters report, Apple having a branded car available in 2024. I want to give some quick context, some history before I welcome Doug Clinton. And the history on Apple and a car is not new. This has been around since 2014, approximately, when the company started Titan. The initial approach was for them to take one of three avenues to the auto market. One was to build their own branded car. That was the primary approach. The second was to license to a traditional automaker. And the third was to acquire Tesla. I'll quickly dispose of the third. That was a fairy tale. Both companies wanted to do design, and that deal fell out of bed. The other two, initially the build a branded car option, that after a couple of years, Apple realized that building a Me Too electric car wasn't in Apple's culture. And so they reorganized the group. They let a fair number of people go from Titan and focused on the AI piece. And that's when you started to hear Tim Cook talk about AI as the mother of all autonomous projects. And that kind of led us to where we're at today. And so I want to bring in Doug and ask a very specific question just on the Reuters report in this 2024. That really is what caught, I think, everybody's attention. What do you think the probability that Apple has a standalone car in 2024?
I would probably give it slightly better than 50% at this point. I think that if they're going to do it, my argument would be that feels like the right time frame. They've got to get something out before the EV market is, more saturated. It's still very early. It will still be relatively early in 4 years. But I think there is a time frame where if they wait too long to get this out, and they've been working on it since 2014. So this is not, something that they're rushing. I don't think that would be fair to say. But if they're going to get something out, I think 2024 is probably the right time frame if you think about sort of the adoption in the market we're seeing right now for EVs.
Okay, I'm going to take the over. I think it's more like 5 to 10 years out. I think it's still going to happen, but I want to challenge your 2024 assumption here. It's 2024. There likely would be some vehicles that people are going to photograph on some track, or they'll likely be out in the wild being tested probably 2 years before it's actually available to the public. Would you agree with that?
I think that's probably true.
Okay, now that's at the end of 2022, and now we're closing out 2021. So essentially 2 years from now. So what's the
Mhm.
probability that they can get something in a full usable prototype? Now, this is not ready for everyday purchase, but a prototype in 2 years. I think that's unlikely, in part because of some of the recent changes. They've recently changed the leadership. It reports it's still under Doug Field, who had some time at Apple, and then he went to Tesla and then came back to Apple. But Doug used to report to Mansfield, who was a hardware person, and Bloomberg had reported earlier this month that that has shifted to John, the head of AI at Apple. And my suspicion is when you have changes like that, that it probably means that the course has not quite been set in stone. And I guess my question for you is, what do you think about that change in the highest leadership in the group relative to that 2024 projection?
Well, the course may not have been set in stone, but I don't know that that necessarily means that the hardware isn't still being prepared. If you've been working on something for 6 years, I don't think that a leadership change means that everything you've done over the last 6 years you have to throw out. So certainly that may mean that there's some directions they might want to tweak. But I don't think that necessarily means that there's all of a sudden, a very much lower probability that something gets out the door. I think I'd point to Tesla and say there's been a lot of leadership change there when Elon was a little bit more erratic. He's obviously much more stable now in terms of his public sort of persona. But I think that he showed that, look, there are leadership changes and you can still deliver product even when you're having leadership changes, as long as the vision for the product is still sort of set and the team can execute on it.
My take is that if there was going to be moving for a prototype within 2 years, we had just heard more about them ramping up their hardware group. The last real big update was a repositioning, a reduction in that group a few years ago. And I think you'd have started to hear about more of a ramp up. So I think this is a piece that we would agree to disagree on. I think it is longer than 2024. I think even if they get into the market, let's say in 2025 or 2026, I think that there's still a massive market for them. I suspect, 5 years from now, there's maybe 30% of the cars are electric and less than that is going to be autonomous. there still is this breathtaking change. And so I think from the highest level is whether it's 4 years from now or whether it's 7 years from now, we're both in agreement that a play in a position, a business around autonomy is something that is in Apple's future. Would we agree on that?
I think that's highly likely at this point. Yes.
I love it. Okay. That's the substance of the conversation. And then we're going to shift to some other quick aspects. I'm just going to go lightning round here. When you think about the opportunity within auto and this transformation, there is this dynamic around safety. And our understanding is that Tim Cook is very concerned about a safety aspect to this. Tech companies get penalized, have been more greatly penalized when there's a fatality related to auto. Tech does make auto safer. A Tesla with autopilot is orders of magnitude safer based on the National Highway Administration than a typical car. But yet, when someone is killed in a Tesla, it does create a lot of media attention. And separately, we think about the Uber incident in Phoenix. And so, I guess my question for you is if somebody like Tim Cook has some concern, let's just take that as something that's true, that Tim Cook has some concern about the safety of these, how does that impact ultimately the timing or the probability that they have an Apple branded car?
I don't know that it impacts it much. And I would point to the history of Apple. They don't always launch products with all the cutting edge features right out of the gate. Go back to the iPhone, 3G was a standard at the time, and they didn't launch it with 3G. It took them a year to add 3G to the iPhone. The Apple Watch took time to add a wireless radio. And so I think you could see a world where in 2024, 2025, whatever the year ultimately is, the car that they launch is electric. It has incredible features that are up to Apple's standard, but maybe they don't launch it with a full autonomy stack that Tesla may have at that point. I mean, 4 or 5 years out, it's hard to say where Tesla will be in autonomy, where Waymo will be, or even where Apple might be, given that they've been working on it for a long time. So I think you could see a world where maybe they don't have quite the same autonomy features as a Tesla vehicle does at that time, but they'll add them quickly like they do with other products.
Makes sense. I think another option that may present itself, if we are correct about kind of this internal concern around safety, I think that there is an option that they even maybe do a fleet like a Zeus-like or Tesla robotaxi type of fleet where you kind of meter, it's more in urban environments. There's a lot of different ways that they can approach the safety aspect. It's not as black and white as it may appear. It is a real problem. It's sad to report that almost 40,000 people lost their lives in 2019 in auto accidents. So the safety is a big topic. I'm going to go to the next lightning round topic, which is the hardware software services approach. Does Apple have the chops to be real in making a computer on wheels?
I think that's what they're best at. That's what they're world class at. They've been making portable computers for probably longer than any consumer company. And I think if you think about the combination of hardware, software, and portable power, which is batteries, I mean, that's what a Mac is, that's what the iPhone is, that's what the Apple Watch is. And so I don't know if any company other than Tesla maybe has the same level of experience in terms of combining hardware, software, and batteries other than Apple. So I think they're in a great position from that standpoint.
Totally agree. I think if just the concept, I mean, they're building their own silicon, like you said, just write down check, check, check. If anybody can do this, it's Apple, it's Tesla. I think it really begs the question, where does traditional auto fit into this? I think the outlook just got a little bit more dim for traditional auto today. What's your take on that? What does this mean for traditional auto?
I think it'll take a long time for them to go away. I know maybe the popular view is to think that they're all sort of dead in the water. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think they'll still be strong competitors in 4, 5, 6, 10 years when Apple ultimately launches this car. I don't think that, Ford or GM will be gone by that point. Will it be more competitive? Certainly. I think it's an opportunity in a way, just as it's a challenge for big auto. If they can find and acquire, emerging startup companies to help them be better at software, I think that's an opportunity for them. They've shown a willingness to do that. GM with Cruise, Ford with their Argo partnership. I think that's really helped them catch up to some degree on the autonomy side. Now, obviously, they're still not great at software. That may always be a challenge, but I think that's something they need to figure out if they do want to stay competitive if we see Apple enter the game.
My take is that they'll be around the big car companies, but they will be not as powerful as they are today. They'll just be a melting ice cream cone on a very hot sidewalk. Next topic is the addressable market. Just quickly framing this in. This is big. This is what a $315 billion company like Apple, in terms of revenue, needs to pursue. There's about 90 million cars sold globally. Consider the average price globally for a new car about $22,000, which implies a TAM of about $2 trillion. So this one is a juicy TAM and further evidence that Apple wants to do something there. Final topic is, what does this mean for Tesla? I'm optimistic about the Tesla story, and I should probably start here, right? This is probably more a question for me.
I think so. Yeah.
So I think that if we think Tesla longer term, right now they have about 35% share of the global EV market. We've thought about that going to 30% over the next 5 years, in long term going to maybe 25%. A player like Apple is something that can pick up the rest of that market share. I think that this market is big enough to accommodate two players. In terms of Tesla and the opportunity that they have, and we're still several years away from Apple having a car, I think the future is still bright. I do think that the more we hear about Apple and the more of these lines that are filled in terms of what the car is actually going to be and the timing, that will have inevitably a negative impact on Tesla's multiple, which will be a negative impact on the stock. It's hard to determine when that is and what the magnitude is going to be. In a nutshell, I think this market is big enough that both can exist, but it's going to create more trials and tributes for Tesla's stock and probably more opportunity for Apple stock longer term. So I'll give you a final word, Doug.
Well, I'll take the final word and say just a reminder from painful lessons we've had in the past. I'll probably steal the final word from you. We've been down a road before where we thought Apple would launch a television. And obviously that didn't happen. We had heard a lot about a TV. We think that there may have even been plans to launch a TV. And just because Apple is working on something, just because Apple is planning on launching something, and I think this is true for any company, doesn't mean that it ultimately sees the light of day. So there's still a chance, I think, that maybe Apple never launches a car. It would certainly be disappointing. But it's a good reminder that it's exciting today to hear the news. It's exciting to think about the future, but it remains to be seen if this is real or not, and only time will tell.
Good final word there. I was hoping to close on that because it's nice that you said we there. It was me. I was the one who had long predicted
You're all
that
involved.
Apple, we were all involved, but I was the one who had felt strongly that they would go in that direction. And a good place to end on is that we want to get this right. It's still unclear what the road ahead is. We know it's a big opportunity, and Apple can have a place there that I think will reward its shareholders and its market cap over time. A nice holiday gift for those of you who are fans of the Apple story. We try to be center of the road here at Loup Ventures. We are center of the road. And on that note, I'm going to sign off. Happy holidays. Bye for now.